Hi, I'm Austin Zimmerman and welcome back to another guide installation video. Today we're here in South Houston and handcrafted by Mr. Alan Lippman, and we're going to be showing you how to install a Laguna 1412 guide kit on your Laguna 14BX machine. Now these guides can be found at blackironparts.com, and that part number is going to be an LAG 1412. Before we get started, we're going to go ahead and take off our bandsaw blade, of course unplug the machine for safety, have a set of safety glasses, and then after we do the installation, we'll show you how to properly set up the blade in the guides for the most efficient sawing experience. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so now that we've got the blade and the table removed, we're gonna go ahead and start with the disassembly of our lower guide set. On these Lagunas, it's pretty straightforward with these 2 thumb screws. This will get the lower guide block off, and then we can install our new lower upgrade black iron guide assembly. Before we do that, I like to always check just to make sure that our side guides are set at the right depth, and that is done with the back dowel here. So we can already see that this is actually pretty close in line, and we're just going to get ourselves in the ballpark here. When we actually go ahead and reinstall the blade, we'll show you how to get that properly set up right behind the teeth. So we'll go ahead and uninstall these thumb screws. So black iron actually provides you with a socket cap head set of bolts to help this fix onto the machine. So there's a lot of adjustability on these kits. We've got essentially 3 points of contact that we need to change to get ourselves in center line, so you can move this guide set to the left, to the right, as well as forward and backwards. So again, we're just going to try to get ourselves in the ballpark. That way when we go ahead and get our blade installed, get the proper tension, we'll move the guides all out of the way, and then we'll get that guide block assembly actually set in its proper position. Right now we're just going to get it on the machine. So now with this just loosely affixed, we'll go ahead and we'll move to the upper assembly, and we'll disassemble it, and we'll show you how to put your upper assembly back on. All right, so now we're moving to the removal of the upper guide assembly. Again, they're pretty straightforward. We're just going to loosen up this side screw here and slide the dowel out. And with our new black iron kit, just to make a note, when we ship these from the facility, this is going to be in a fixed position just for packaging. This orientation on this eccentric shaft that you see here might not be the correct fashion. It may fit on the machine and get you to center line. And so what we can do here is we'll loosen up the set screw on this side of the block, or it could be on this side, to get the guide closer to center line. What I mean by that is if you turn the shaft left or right, it's going to move the guide block to the right or to the left once it's actually in the cup. So we'll get this kind of just set in here and just kind of lightly affixed, and we'll go ahead and install our blade. We'll find our center line, get our guides adjusted, and we'll walk you through the proper process of how to actually set the guides up against the blade for a smooth and efficient sawing experience. All right, so now with our blade installed, we're going to find center line and show y'all how to properly adjust this black iron upgrade kit on your Laguna 14BX. So what I like to do first is go ahead and open up the guides all the way. So we loosen up these front Allen head bolts, and then we move the guides all the way out on the top and the bottom set. We'll go ahead and get our blade installed to the proper tension, give it a few revolutions on the wheel. That way it falls into its natural state of where it's going to ride on the wheel, and that's going to set your blade depth. And that's going to be our baseline for where we need to set these guides up as far as the guide versus the back of that gullet. So with the bottom guide, we're going to start off and we're going to find our center line. So again, you've got kind of 2 points of contact here and 2 variables to mess with, left and right with the lower screws, and then with the dowel it's going to move you forward or backwards. So we'll just make sure, and we'll come down here and find the center line of our blade with the backup bearing here. We can roll this forward. Just kind of getting this a little closer to the blade so we can kind of test our center line. So the guide is already pretty close. And then we can loosen this up and kind of clock the guide. And you want to make sure that you're 100% perpendicular with the blade here. So now that we've got our center line established, we can actually we can go ahead and move it forward with that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these side guides just behind the gullet. So you don't want any interference with the actual kerf itself. So if we do, when we have those rollers moved up, what's going to happen is we're actually going to take all the set out of this blade. So we'll move the roller up. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do two things in one with this dowel. Is we're going to make sure that we're centered, making sure that the guide is horizontal, and is also we're going to take and we're going to put the front of this face of this bearing right behind the gullet to keep us out of the set of the teeth. Because if you have it too far forward and you got it running against the set, you're going to take all the set out of the blade and it's going to fishtail, or the blade's going to want to go where it wants to. So we're going to try to keep that away from the teeth as best as possible on this guide set. So then we're going to check and make sure for square, and then we're going to tighten it down. All right, so now that we have our depth set, we're going to go ahead and set up our guides. What I like to tell everybody is just a business card's thickness in between the sides of the backup guide. You only want to be able to touch the guides during feeding force. So when you're making those turns, you'll be able to touch the side guides, and then when you're actually feeding in the material to the back of the blade is whenever the blade will then touch the backup bearing. So kind of just get these in the vicinity here, and then we'll tighten those down. And the same with the side guides, you can take these little side pins here and move the guide closer or further away from the blade. And again, we just want about a business card's thickness from the blade. Enough to where whenever you roll the blade, it does not touch. But if you were to put a little feeding force on the side, you can see that's making contact. And then do the same with the other side. And again, we just want that blade to just roll through there, but only touch during feeding force. We'll go ahead and snug these down now because this guide set is ready to go. Then we'll just go ahead and do a little quick check on all our stops, make sure everything's tight. All right, and now we can go ahead and put our table back on, and then we'll go ahead and adjust our upper guide assembly. All right, so now starting with the upper guide assembly, we have 2 points of adjustability. On this eccentric dowel, if you loosen it up from the actual cup that's on the machine, and we loosen up the set screw on the side of the block, you'll notice that if we spin this dowel, the guide will actually move left and right. And so that's going to help us find our center line. Now, 2 other points that we have to be able to find is making sure that our guide is completely vertical on that shaft, and then the actual depth, making sure that that front face of the guide is just right behind the gullet of that blade to stay out of the set and make sure we don't damage the blade or the bearings on this. I'm actually going to move around to the front here, and we're going to help find center line. So kind of holding your guide vertical, we're going to rotate the cup or the actual eccentric post, so that way we can find the center line of that backup guide. And once it's in the center and your guide is perfectly straight, we can tighten that down, and making sure also that your face of the guides are behind the gullet. You can tighten down the cup. And then with this staying vertical, we can tighten up our side guide. Now we can adjust our front bearings. Again, we just want a business card's thickness in between the blade and the side rollers. Move this one. Making sure that they only turn under feeding force when you pop this guy back out just a little bit. Perfect. And then we want a business card thickness on the backup bearing as well. Again, you only want it to contact under that slight feeding pressure. All right, and now we have our upper guide assembly installed. So now you've successfully installed your Laguna 1412 upgrade guide kit on your Laguna 14BX machine. Again, just a few tips and tricks to help get the best blade life and guide life out of this machine is just really all in the setup. You know, you want to make sure that while the blade is rolling through the guides, you're not seeing any rolling. If it is, you're only prematurely wearing out the side of the blade and or the bearing itself. So again, it's just all in the setup. You want to make sure that that face of that bearing is behind the gullet and staying away from the set, as well as you want a business card thickness in between those side guides and the backup guide to the blade to get the best blade life and the best guide life. If you need any other help or want to watch our how-to videos for more tech tips, you can always log on to blackironparts.com. I'm Austin Zimmerman, and thanks for watching.